In this tutorial, we are going to cover the functions and tools and steps required to create this really cool effect. This effect is sometimes called a double overlay. This goes back to the era of photography, pre-digital, when photographers could create this effect when they developed their film. When they developed their film, they developed two together, so they develop over an existing negative to create this really cool effect. Quite often we use portraits of people and landscapes. We can use other sort of different styles and types as well, but this is just quite a nice combination. So I'm going to show you how to create this effect. We'll go through it step by step using this portrait picture. So let's get started. So we're going to be using Adobe Photoshop. So first of all, let's open our file. So I'm going to go to my Finder, and I am going to go to a little folder I've put together called Examples. In Examples, I've got a bunch of landscape pictures and a bunch of portrait pictures. So I'm going to go to Portraits, find my bearded man picture. Now you'll probably notice I've put the dimensions of the image. This is because when I first downloaded it from my premium subscription site, it was huge. It was like over 8,000 pixels, which is great because it has lots of use purposes. You can have it really big on a billboard, or you can have it sort of, zoom in and sort of edit details. So it's really great when you can get large size files because you get all that detail, loads and loads of pixels. However, this file was too big. It was bigger than the landscape file that I wanted to use. So rather than stretching the landscape file and making it go all blurry and pixelated, I resaved this file to make it a bit smaller. So let's open that file, with Photoshop. Sorry, my bad. So I'm going to right click, open with Photoshop. Okay, so right click, or if you're using a trackpad, 2-finger tap, open with Photoshop, and then let's open that up. Okay, so now we have the image open in Photoshop. Now, what I love about this image is it's super clean. It's got some really distinct lines. It's on a plain background, which is really, really helpful. It's not essential, but it is really helpful because it means you can cut out your character and you can apply the double overlay just to your subject, to the person, to the character, not to the background. So we've got this one open. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw around him. So I'm going to use a function called select subject. So the subject is the person or the thing that is central to the photo. So Photoshop will run an algorithm, work out what the subject is, generally by what's in focus, where the detail is, and then it will draw around that for me. So select at the top, down to subject, click subject. Okay, so very quickly it ran that, and as you can see, Photoshop has said this is the subject and it's given me a nice outline. So I've got a cutout that I can use. So the next thing I want to do is save it. Go back to select at the top menu, go down to save selection, click save selection. Now I get to name it, so I'm just going to call it bearded man, and I'm going to click save. It's going to save it in the channels. So I'll show you that in a moment. Okay, so now it's saved. So I'm going to duplicate this layer. Okay, now there's two ways you can duplicate a layer. You can either drag it down to the bottom. There's a little plus size. Let me just resize my screen so you can see that. Okay, so option 1 to duplicate, drag it down onto the plus next to the bin. Okay, that's option 1. Option 2, which is much easier, Command J. There we go. So it's duplicated the selection. Awesome, we're good. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is get that landscape in. So I'm going to go back to my Finder window. I'm going to go back to my folder, landscapes, and I'm going to use the color explosion landscape that I downloaded from my premium subscription website. So 2-finger click on my trackpad, or right click if you have a mouse, open with, and then go down to Photoshop. Okay, now another neat trick, if I want to sort of copy something from one Photoshop artboard into another, I can go to select, all, and you'll see we have what we call the running ants. So these little dotted lines that go around, it means that is selected. So I'm going to copy, Command C or Control C if you are using Windows, go back to this project, and I'm going to paste, Command V. Okay, there we go. So now we have both in the same art space. So now I want to see how it looks. So what I'm going to do with this layer selected, as it is now, because it's the one we're sort of most recently used, I'm going to go to opacity. So it's just up here, opacity. I'm going to drop the opacity down so it becomes a little bit see-through, and I can see how it looks over my chap. Now, if I had a really big image and I wanted, say, the mountains or the sky to be lined up with the eyes, I can use a tool, a keystroke, Command T. Let me just grab that again, sorry. Command T. And you'll see I've got this blue bounding box. That means I can now move it around, okay? So I'm just going to press undo, put it back where it is, and I'm just going to repeat that step for you. Make sure you've got that layer selected. Command T. And then it's short for transform. Transform, Command T for transform. Okay, so I'm just going to undo that. I quite like where it is already, so I'm happy with that. So I'm just going to leave it where it is. So I know it looks really good. So now I want to kind of crop it out. So I want the effect on the subject's face and body, but not in the background. So remember earlier, we saved a cutout. We're going to use that now. So I'm going to go to select, load selection. So this dialog box has come back up. Find your channel, Bearded Man. So that's the one we saved earlier with a cutout. Click OK. Okay. Now I want it to be what we call a mask. A mask is an effect, we used it earlier in the year when we did the waterfront logo. A mask is an effect that allows us to black out certain areas and make other areas transparent. So we use this little tool at the bottom. It's kind of a white rectangle with a black square. So I've got this layer highlighted, I've loaded my selection, and now I'm going to press layer mask. Okay, so now it's masked out. The effect is only visible where we had that mask cut out earlier. Now I'm going to pop the transparency right back up again. Okay, so there you can see where we had that mask, that cutout is completely transparent and everything else is black like the background. Okay, so that's the background there that we can see, but yeah, it's creating a transparency, allowing us to see this area here. Now, let's say, for example, we wanted some of this to be transparent, but not all of it. Let's say I just wanted to see his eyes, nose, and mouth, like his features, but I wanted the rest of the artwork to have that full kind of color effect going on. We can do this. So we need to make sure we're working in the layer mask, okay? So if I click on this one, you see I have these little white brackets around the edge. If I click on this one, I have these little white brackets around the edge. You need to have this one active. You need to have the white brackets around this one. Okay, so we're working in the layer mask, and we can paint in the layer mask. Wherever we paint black will be transparent. So I'm going to go over and check. I have black active here. If you don't, you can click on these little arrows and they swap between black and white. So we've got black active here. I've got my brush tool active already. So what brush am I using? I've got 316, so it's quite a big brush, you can probably see. Mode is normal, its opacity is 47%, so it's a little bit see-through. It's not a really strong flow or opacity, which is kind of what I want because I don't want it to be completely showing through. So now I can rub my brush over and I can choose which areas I would like to become visible, okay? Right, I did that all in one stroke, so I'm going to press undo. I'm going to show you what that would look like if I had my opacity of my brush fully tweaked up, my flow fully tweaked up, and let's go for a really hard edge brush as well so you can see the difference. Okay, big difference, right? So it's not quite as subtle. So let's undo those, okay, and go back and have a soft brush, and let's have the opacity 47, 49. Yeah, that's good. So that loads with that brush. And now I can sort of paint the features and let them come through very subtly. Isn't that nice? Cool, huh? So yeah, that's how we do it. Now, final thing, as we are creating artwork, we're likely going to want to blend some graphics, some photography, some typography. We can save this. So we can open it in Illustrator and add some other effects if we want to. And we can save it as a PNG. And a PNG, as you know, has a transparent background, so we'll only bring through the character if we want to. So if I click on this button here, so the little eyeball hides that layer, okay? So anywhere there's checkerboard is transparent, Okay, so if I was to save this as a PNG right now, all of this in this box would be completely transparent. So let's do that. So you could obviously save it as a Photoshop file first, but we're just going to go export, export for web. It's just having a load. It's quite a large file. You'll find these large files do take a little bit longer to load. Okay, so it's offering me a PNG. As you can see at the moment, we're looking at 3,240 pixels in width. That's still pretty big. I'm just going to reduce that down because I know that in the SoundCloud banner that we are designing, it's about 2,840, is it, or 2,480? Anyway, it's just under 3,000 width and it's only about 500 in height. So we definitely don't need it as wide as the banner. So I'm going to reduce that down. It makes the file a bit smaller. And then when we're done, we can press save. And what I've done in my little folder on my desktop for today, in my examples, I've created a little folder called working files, and I can put in here finished PNGs. I've obviously done one earlier, and I can save this here. It'll probably ask me to replace because obviously I've saved it already, but I could call that portrait 2 and just save that in here. Likewise, you can save JPEGs. We've covered this a couple of times in class now. So you create something in Photoshop or Illustrator, you save for web, and then you can save it as a PNG with a transparent background or as a JPEG, which is a much smaller file, doesn't have transparency, but it's much better for websites because it's not quite as heavy, doesn't take as long to load. So hopefully you enjoyed this tutorial. I will do another quick one to show you how we can open this in Illustrator.